Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the We the People competition. Congratulations on being in the top 12. We're looking forward to your presentation. We're going to introduce ourselves and then ask you to introduce yourselves, and then we'll go from there. My name is Dan Taubman. I'm a senior judge on the Colorado Court of Appeals in Denver, Colorado.
Hey, my name is Thomas Mackey. I'm in the history department at the University of Louisville and with the law school here at Louisville.
And I'm Lindsay Draper, retired from the juvenile court bench here in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin.
So would you like to introduce yourselves and your teacher, please?
Thank you, judges. Hello, we are Unit 2 from Reno High School. My name is Penny Smurden, and I will be attending the University of Nevada.
My name is Jody Hoover, and I will also be attending the University of Nevada.
My name is Jason Pitha, and I'll be going to San Diego State. Our teacher is Mr. Richard Clark, and our unit coach is Mr. Sam Macaluso.
Well, thank you. This afternoon, we're going to address question 1, which I will now read. What were the major disagreements among the 55 delegates during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and how were they resolved? What issues, if any, were not resolved, and what were the consequences? What changes, if any, should be made to the Constitution? You may begin.
To make stone soup, one must first gather the correct ingredients. Stone soup is a European folktale whose moral is to bring ingredients together to create something benefiting the people. The delegates at the Philadelphia Convention melted ideas for the new Constitution, and the combination of these ideas was done to please the most people possible. Many of the delegates had opposing viewpoints on what ingredients should be included and which should be left out. In a letter to Benjamin Harrison, George Washington wrote, "I wish the Constitution which is offered had been made more perfect, but I sincerely believe it is the best that could be obtained at this time." The delegates did the best they could to use their ingredients and ultimately created stone soup for the people.
One major disagreement among the delegates was representation for states of drastically different populations. James Madison's Virginia plan offered a national government composed of 3 branches. This ingredient benefited states with large populations by giving them more representation based on the amount of free people living in a state.
Connecticut delegate William Johnson wanted to enhance the soup by adding a strong national government that could protect the rights of small states from encroachment by their larger counterparts. Johnson supported the New Jersey plan because it gave all states equal representation in the legislature. He advocated for small states and disputed the Virginia plan. In the end, he gave his full support to the Connecticut Compromise, still protecting small states.
Slavery was also a major issue at the convention. Luther Martin argued that slavery should not be protected in the Constitution. No delegate, however, called for the prohibition of slavery to be written. The need to compromise on slavery was great, and this unresolved issue resulted in the Civil War and the death of over 700,000 Americans. This was a bitter ingredient in the soup. The relationship between the states and the federal government discussed during the convention resulted in another major disagreement: who should have the power of the military and what limitations should be imposed. George Mason, Richard Sherman, Eldridge Gary, and many other delegates vehemently argued against standing armies, Gary stating that they are dangerous in times of peace. His words were dismissed, and the convention imposed few limitations on Congress's power to raise an army.
Charles Pinckney suggested that state militias need uniformed training in arms in order to be effective. Article 1, Section 8 states, Congress would organize, arm, and discipline the militia, while states appoint the officers. Military power was given to Congress in Article 1, Section 8, and the President as Commander-in-Chief in Article 2, Section 2. The branches balanced, the stone soup was not overpowered by ingredients.
Article 2 is one of the most controversial yet bland ingredients in the stone soup. The emergency powers of the president are not mentioned in the Constitution and therefore unresolved. Presidents have exercised this as an inherent power as commander-in-chief. During the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln unconstitutionally suspended habeas corpus.
Article 1, Section 9 states that only Congress can suspend habeas corpus during rebellion or invasion. Also, when President Harry Truman attempted to seize steel mills during the Korean War. Although the powers were still vague, the Supreme Court ruled that this ultimately overstepped his constitutional authority in the 1952 case of Youngstown Sheet & Tube Company versus Sawyer. These became the consequences of the framers' unresolved Article 2.
This panel is split on changes that should be made to the Constitution, but we do agree on one. The framers of the Constitution added Article 1, Section 3, which established state legislatures choosing senators. The The 17th Amendment changed this, replacing it with the appointment of senators through direct election. This amendment needs to be repealed. George Mason observed that the state legislatures ought to have some means of defending themselves against encroachment of the national government.
The most adamant supporters of the 17th Amendment were urban political machines, hoping to easily sway the public with their slogans and campaigns to control state legislation. When only 9 states require civic education, how can we expect to trust the people in this matter? The 17th Amendment should be repealed because we are a republic, and the stone soup can be as good as it once was. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your opening statement. I hope you have the recipe for success in your opening remarks. I like the different disputes among the founding fathers that you discussed, some of which we haven't heard before, including about the power of the military under the new government and the emergency powers of the president under the Constitution, or implied powers of the president under the Constitution. But I'd like to go back to what you were saying about slavery as being an unresolved issue. So do you think the issue of slavery has been resolved in whole or in part since the ratification of the Constitution? And if so, how?
Slavery has not necessarily been resolved today. There are still arguments between racism and racial prejudice, as can be seen through the Black Lives Matter movement today. And many instances of this show that racism is still rampant and is still rooted in the history of this country and is still a problem that needs to be solved.
To add on to my colleague, current day slavery can be seen as human trafficking, and that has not been resolved, and that is also carried over from before.
We can also see slavery in other aspects, such as the executive power of pardoning. For example, after the Civil War, President Johnson pardoned 3,000 Confederate generals, and they were allowed to participate back in government. Further allows for not necessarily just slavery, but also discrimination and other things associated with slavery to happen and occur.
Yeah, I think that gives me a segue to ask them, because you've just mentioned the presidential power, pardoning power, about what did the delegates in Philadelphia think about the role of the president? The presidency gave the anti-federalists willies. And by the time we got to the 21st century, we live in almost a cult of the presidency. So first, give me a sense of the 18th century understanding of the presidency as an institution, and then bring it forward, and how did we get here today?
So when the founders were creating the Constitution, they had many ideas on what the president should be, because we had never had a president before, because our nation was so new. And so they had to rely on what had already occurred. So, for example, Hamilton presented his Hamilton Plan, which made it so that the president was the president for a life tenure, which is very similar to the monarchy that they had come from in Great Britain. And so this was one idea of how presidency occurred. However, the delegates, ultimately this failed, and the delegate needed a president that had a term limit to fully represent the people and could be a Republican democracy.
Why not several presidents? A multiple presidency.
Well, as Federalist 74 argues that war requires a single leader, and the Federalists, because the framers gave full power of the military to the president, there's an idea of this one war required this one single leader. That is another thought to why we have one president. And we eventually moved from this idea of not knowing what the presidency was to how we view the president today through things like that, through things that cleared his implied powers, like cases like Hormasu v. US, which didn't allow presidents to exercise emergency powers in terms of locking up Japanese residents because of military. And so through clearing up these implied powers and through these limitations, we've come to view this president as how we see him today.
To add on, we had just come from the Articles of Confederation, which the states were sovereign, and the executive power did not have very much authority over these states. And so we needed to create a balance for that. So the Constitution creates these three branches that balance each other out, which allows for us to have one president that will be balanced with the judiciary and the legislature.
I need to understand what getting rid of the 17th Amendment accomplishes. In that I happen to believe that voting for senators is a good idea. Tell me why that's not, why I shouldn't be able to do that.
Well, because in Federalist 51, Madison argues that the legislative authority necessarily predominates. And in Federalist 52, he argues that the House should be dependent on the people, and therefore the Senate should be based on the states. And so if we repeal the 17th Amendment, it should be based on the states, while the House is meant to be based on the people, because this comes from the Articles of Confederation, in which all of the states were simply just together making a nation. And giving this power back to the states and giving it to the people balances the power of the people and the federal government.
And if I were, go ahead.
To add on to this, to add on, the civic engagement is really important, and it is a fundamental idea of classical republicanism. And so if we remove the 17th Amendment or repeal it, it'll make it so it is an indirect election. And so people will have to be civically engaged and learn more about their local representatives that they would have to send out to be elected by the states. And so it would increase this idea of civic engagement and allow for this fundamental idea of classical republicanism.
Federalist 10 also argues against pure democracy, stating that a common interest will arise and there will be nothing to check the inducements to sacrifice a minority. And so the 17th Amendment was a push towards pure democracy through adding direct election. And this goes completely against what the framers wanted in a Republican form of government. And so repealing the 17th would be a return to what the framers intended.
And I would share with you my belief that these very framers that you're talking about were the people who didn't have the backbone to say slavery is immoral. So I don't know that I want to go back to everything they had to say. I like the fact that we've evolved to the place where we said, oh yeah, Lindsay's vote counts. Let him choose. We don't need some elitist to choose the senators. You got an answer for me?
Well, the United States is based on federalism. And in Federalist 62, Madison also argues that giving the state legislatures the ability to choose senators would provide a convenient link between state government and federal government, which means that there's a balance of power there, which is very important.
We also don't want to go completely back to what the founder, like where we were in the time the Constitution was framed. We have progressed as a society forward. What we are just saying is that if we repeal the 17th Amendment, it will just
I think what my colleague's trying to say is that there needs to be a balance between the states and the people, because a bill passed because senators are now based off of direct election, it is now fused the intentions of both Congress and the Senate. And so we're trying to move it back towards the idea that any bill passed would have the consent of the people in the House and the consent of the states as well in the Senate.
Also, what I was trying to say beforehand, in the preamble, it states that we are trying to further perfect our union. And so with this, we believe that with the 17th Amendment, that was something that we tried and we might have to revert back to. Also, Justice Brandeis stated that states are the laboratory of democracy. And so with the 17th Amendment implemented, we see in these states how the 17th Amendment has affected that. And so we would like to go back to that. Also, another alternative to the 17th Amendment, because it would be so hard to pass, would be ranked choice voting, which would allow for more minority and representation in elections.
Thank you.
I too am a little concerned because since Andrew Jackson, we've been a political democracy. The republic is long gone and they ain't coming back. And that the pressures of political democracy are such that withdrawing the 17th Amendment is going to be seen, it is a reduction of democracy and participation. So I want you to worry about that, at least in a general sense, maybe a little more than you are right now. So I think I saw the 1 minute a minute ago. Okay. So I just wanted my 2 cents in there that I'm not sure a proposal that's going to withdraw democracy has many legs. There it is right there. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that can I continue what I was doing?
Yes, you may finish your sentence.
With also in regards to implementing the 17th Amendment, we would also want to invoke the Wyoming rule, which would allow for more representatives in the House of Representatives because the House is for the people and the Senate is for the states.
Let's show our appreciation for the team.
Yeah. Nicely done.
Thank you for your presentation. Let me share a few comments. I think that your discussion of the issues in dispute during the Constitutional Convention were good. I liked that your discussion about the power of the military and the emergency powers of the executive were good. We haven't heard discussion of those issues, so I think that was good. When I asked you about slavery and how that's continued, I would have liked to have heard a little bit about the Civil War amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and how they address the issue of slavery, and even a discussion of some of the other amendments like the amendment prohibiting poll taxes. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm sure you recognize that your proposal about repealing the 17th Amendment was somewhat controversial, but you were very vigorous in defense of your proposal. So I commend you for that. That proposal seems to be contrary to the movement that we've had in recent years to make the country more democratic and to have more direct election and have people favor eliminating the Electoral College and the National Voter Compact to eliminate the Electoral College. So your proposal is sort of going against what the trend has been, to the extent that your proposal is supported by the fact that only 9 states require civic education. Maybe the remedy is to have a push to have all states require civic education and to promote programs like We the People. And then maybe your proposal would not be necessary. But as I said, I commend you for advancing that proposal and supporting it with enthusiasm and with reasoning that was behind it. So congratulations for your presentation this afternoon. We enjoyed hearing your presentation.
Yeah, I can link to that. I'm a prof. I want students who take a position and defend it. I get so many students who are terrified to take a position and defend it. You guys are already there, so nicely done. Now, these are hard issues. People have struggled with some of these big ideas since the 18th century to today, and it's confounded legislatures and Congresses and Supreme Court justices. So of course we asked 3 high school students to fix it for us. So it's okay. You did a nice job of identifying issues, again, taking a position and defend it, and then standing by the decision under questioning. I really like the way you handled yourselves. Well done.
You know, this deep into the day, hearing the same question covered, when you hear different ideas, but also different cases cited, because I think this was the first time that I heard discussion of Karematsu. I don't think I'd heard Youngstown. It sort of jumps out at you. I wanted to chat with you about the urban political machines. I didn't have time to do that. And I remember when you started and you thought the idea might be to please the most people possible. And I had an immediate reaction to say, you're not going to accomplish anything if you try and do that. That's why you all want to meet in secret. And that because if you stop and think about who, if they read the final product, would have felt left out. I mean, clearly the people of African-American descent and people who just happened to be women, and the white guys didn't have enough property. I mean, a whole bunch of people would not have fit in there. But these guys who were in, frankly, an emergency situation had to come up with what would work. And I liked the way you presented it. In answer to the, well, no, you know what, I need to stop. Let me just say that you all did an excellent job. I very much enjoyed listening to your presentation. Again, you're to be congratulated for being in the top 12, and I truly wish you good luck.
Right.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Nicely done.
again for your presentation. We really appreciate it.